Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I am speaking with an amazing woman named Becky Morrison. Becky was a high achiever who had it all. She had what most of the world would define as success. She went to a prestigious college and got her law degree. She was working as a litigator at a big law firm and was secretly on track to partnership. She was married and had a daughter. Then one day she sat back and realized she was not happy. Listen in as Becky talks about how she went from lawyer to a leadership and happiness coach and the steps she took to find her ultimate place in life. We will be discussing intuition, happiness, and getting rid of things that no longer serve us. Welcome, Becky.
Thank you for having me, Sabrina. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. I so appreciate you taking some time out of your day to sit down with us and share your journey and some nuggets of information that hopefully we can all use in our own world. Because I think a lot of us struggle with this, the happiness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially right now, right?
Good points. Good point. 100%. So, well, first of all, how was your weekend? How are things?
Everything is good. We are on snow day. Well, yesterday, I guess, was technically a holiday, but we had snow over the weekend. Today is a snow day. So it's been a very quiet 4 days at our house.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you guys go snowing or throw a snowball or?
No, it wasn't that kind of snow. So it was like one of those, I live in the mid-Atlantic. So it was a typical mid-Atlantic storm. Snow, then followed by sleet, then followed by freezing rain, which just creates a whole slushy, icy mess. Yeah. So not the fun kind of snow, unfortunately, but
not the kind that you see on Christmas movies.
No.
I hear you. Well, nice for the change of weather. I'm down here in Florida, so we don't get all of that. I would say goodness because I'm down here, but if I was living there, I probably wouldn't call it goodness. But I do. I miss the season sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's all relative. I grew up in Minnesota, so this is just fine with me. Snow at 30 degrees, and then the next day is 40. I'm here for it. It's the cold that I can't do anymore, like the bitter cold.
The bitter cold. Yeah, I'm originally from Chicago, so I totally get that. Well, listen, I would love for you to kind of start this podcast with your story. I think your story is. I think it's kind of funny.
Fair.
You were a lawyer and then suddenly had a change of heart. I would love for you to kind of tell us your life and, during that transition and how you kind of came to that realization and let us tag along on that.
Sure. So, my story starts like a lot of people's stories start, and you alluded to it in the introduction. I did a lot of what I felt I should do, right? I went to the good college, got the good grades or the okay grades, and then got a job, knew it was going to be time eventually to go back to grad school, had ruled out medical school at that point, and was sort of down to business school or law school. And I didn't actually flip a coin, but basically flipped a coin between the two, picked law school. Again, did what I was supposed to do, went to law school, got awesome grades, wrote onto Law Journal, got a job at a big law firm with a big paycheck on partnership track. And I found myself, at that point I was married with a toddler, and I found myself one evening sitting on the floor of the bathroom with toddler in the bath, my daughter, and cordless phone clipped to the back of my pants, and toilet seat cover down with the notebook and paper spread all around me. And I was doing two things. I was bathing my toddler and trying to prepare our expert for their upcoming testimony and sort of run this call and take notes and ask questions and all that jazz. And in that moment, I sort of had two thoughts. The first was, who says you can't do it all? Like, I'm literally here. I'm killing it. Like, I'm successful at work. I've got a great job. I'm making good money. I'm on partnership track. I'm married. I've got a daughter. I'm present here for her bathtub. Like, you know, I'm killing it. And then I had the next thought, which was, and I'm exhausted. And this is unsustainable. And probably most scarily at that point, given what I had invested in becoming a lawyer, I'm not sure that being a lawyer is making me happy.
Wow.
And that was the first of a series of events that kind of kicked off this inquiry for me of, wait a minute, what really matters in life? What's most important here? What do I want to be the top priority in this season of my life? Fast forward a handful of months, and it's review time at the law firm.
Yeah.
And I'm on the heels of a very traumatic pregnancy loss. We were trying to get pregnant with number 2. And I get my review. And for those of you who aren't familiar with law firms, many big law firms, and probably small and medium firms too, bonus you based on your billable hours that year.
Yeah.
And our minimum billable requirement to get a bonus was 1,950 hours billed. Now, you don't bill every single hour you're sitting at work. You only bill when you're doing billable client work.
Yes.
And so to bill 1,950 hours, you'd have to work a 7.5-hour day every work day for the year. Now, nobody does that, right? Because there's holidays and vacation. On top of that, to bill a 7.5-hour day, you're probably working 9, 10, maybe even 12 hours. So you can just have an idea of, like, to meet minimum billables, you're working hard. Well, that year we had a trial, and the same trial that I had been prepping for on that bathroom floor.
Yeah.
And I had billed somewhere in the ballpark of 2,200 hours. So a whole bunch of extra hours, almost a whole extra, I forget what that works out to, like a whole extra billable month or 2. And I say that not to complain, but just to objectively say that I had worked my butt off, right?
Yeah.
And so I got feedback in my review. After they did this sort of substantive feedback, the reviewer, who I was at a national law firm. So the reviewer sat in Chicago. I sat in DC. I had never met this person other than in the context of this review. And he said, hey, off the record, I just want to tell you, we think you should look for alternate childcare arrangements. At the time, my daughter was in daycare, and he said, you need to get a nanny so you can be more available.
Wow. And this is what I find, and it sounds bad to say hilarious or funny, but like, this is insane. Like, I just can't even fathom you sitting there and actually taking this seriously. Like, I feel like I would just be like, are you kidding right now? Like, is this a joke? That is just absolutely crazy. So what happened?
Well, so I sort of said, well, so that I can do what? Like, I exceeded minimum billables. As far as I know, my substantive performance, you just told me, was good. So what is it that I need the nanny for?
Yeah.
I mean, and the answer came down to sort of like FaceTime, that you need the nanny so that you can be more present in the office. Now, bear in mind, this is about 16 years ago. So it's like a lot of the things that allow us to work remotely easily now. But still, we had the ability to log in remotely. I did frequently work in the evening from home. So it wasn't that I wasn't doing the work. They just weren't seeing me.
Yeah.
And, I would love to say that I sort of had that incredulity that you described. But at the time, like I said, I was coming off this very traumatic pregnancy loss and really just kind of fell apart. Like, I was like, I don't even know what to do with this, because what if I was pregnant right now or facing, the reality of having another child, and now you're telling me, like, it's not enough. What I'm giving is not enough. I feel like I've given everything that I could possibly give.
Yeah.
And that was the real impetus for me to take a long, hard look at whether this job, this organization, was really giving me the value for my effort.
Yeah.
And I concluded they weren't. And I did what a lot of people would do in that situation, which was, first I said, oh, okay, well, maybe I just need to go to a different law firm. Maybe I need to find somewhere that's a better culture fit for me.
Okay.
And I guess I should add, when I freaked out on this reviewer, he knew he had stepped in it. And so he was, he's like, let's continue the conversation later. And within a half hour, at the time in the DC office, I think there were 3 female partners. 2 of them came to my office to talk to me about working part-time, which is absurd, right? Like, why does somebody who exceeded your billable hours need to work part-time? I'm super confused, right? And they didn't even realize that when they came. So once I said, hey, look, I billed 2,200 hours last year, why would I go part-time? They were like, yeah, I don't really know why I'm here. I'm like, you're
Wow.
here because he knows that he has stepped in it and he's trying to sort of salvage it, but it was not salvageable. So
I don't want to I'm not trying to cut
no,
you off,
please.
but I just have a question.
Uh-huh.
So what you did, the hours that you logged seem to me above, and that's where the story is going here. Is that like, is it normal for lawyers to be expected to bill more than that? Or do you think they were taking advantage of your work ethic and just how good you were, so they wanted you more? Like,
I think it varies by firm and by specialty, but it is not uncommon in my experience for litigators to bill more than that. Because
wow.
when you're working, I mean, so the part I said about, billing 7.5 hours doesn't mean working 7.5 hours. On the flip side of that, when you're in trial, you basically are working 20 hours a day. I mean, with, very minimal breaks, you're eating meals as a trial team, you're working through those meals. So you can get a lot of billables very quickly during trial
Yeah.
time. So it's not uncommon to go over.
Wow.
I don't think I was the highest billables in my associate class that year, but I was near the, in the top half for sure,
Yeah.
probably the top third, maybe the top quarter, maybe the top 10%. I don't know for sure.
So lawyers in general, then, is it like okay to say that their life is pretty much dedicated to being a lawyer? Like,
I mean, I don't think you can say that top to bottom, but certainly in the big law context, it is
okay.
pretty common for your life to be
Wow.
very much dedicated to being a lawyer. Yeah.
Wow.
It comes with its own set of challenges, particularly if you're not actually enjoying the work.
That's the whole thing. Yeah. And I totally agree. Cause I'm calculating in my head. I'm like, well, actually I work a lot more than
Mhm.
that, but I love what I do, which is what we're talking about today. So
Right.
that's great. Okay, go ahead.
Right.
Continue.
And so from there, I mean, so that was sort of like not an aha, but a pivotal moment in my life where I said, okay, Becky, it's about what actually matters most in life. So what matters most to you in this season? And I decided that what mattered most to me in that season was being a mom first and being able to be present for my family. And that didn't mean for me deciding to stay at home and not work outside the home. And that's just how I defined it. What it meant was finding a way to work that I could still use my brain on things other than sort of like parenting and homemaking, but also could prioritize my family when I needed to. And so I actually stayed in the law for a long period of time, but I moved to a different firm, a big litigation shop here in DC. And I was there for a decade as a sort of hybrid. Sorry. Like one of the few people in the United States who still has an answering machine. So it should be done. There we go. So I apologize about that. I stayed there for a decade in a hybrid sort of administrative legal role, which gave me a ton more schedule control. The other thing that I got was a front row seat. That firm is a super high powered litigation shop, probably one of the best litigation firms in the country. And I was lucky to work alongside lawyers who loved being lawyers, who loved practicing the law, who spent, well, and actually, interestingly, they don't have minimum billables at that firm, but they spent their time, they worked real hard, but it was a much different vibe than spending it with a bunch of people who weren't sure they wanted to be lawyers.
Got it.
So I did that for a long time and then reached another point, a pivot point. By this point, we had a second child and my kids were in sort of late elementary and middle school and needing me in different ways. And I was at work a little bit bored and kind of saw two possible paths. I could stay where I was and really go like, and maybe actually move organizations, but double down on developing some very real expertise in legal technology, which is a space that I had been working in. But that would have required me to really go all in on work. And I wasn't that excited substantively about that work.
Yeah.
Although it's really cool and there's some really fun stuff happening in that space, it just didn't grab me. And the other alternative was to sort of take a left turn and do something entirely different, which is what I did. So I left the law to go and work for an investment firm as their COO. And so I've always been a people process person. And then this was just an opportunity to build up and again, work on that part of my skill set. So I did that for 3 years, had a lot of fun doing it. And then kind of came to the realization along with my boss, the head of the company at the time, that the organization wasn't going to grow the way that we had anticipated, that it didn't make sense for them to have me there, that what they really needed was a CFO. And I didn't want to become a CFO. I didn't want to learn about accounting to that level.
Yeah.
And so, while I didn't get fired or laid off, I sort of did, right? And found myself again at loose ends and did what a lot of us do, which is like, let me apply to all the jobs I can do. Well, you've heard my resume. So I'm a practicing lawyer who has a ton of management and people experience, a ton of process experience. The list of jobs that I'm qualified for was pretty long.
Yeah.
And then finally someone, and it was my parents actually, said, wait, time out. This is an opportunity. What do you want to do? How do you want to use your time?
Yeah.
And so I hired myself a coach, and through coaching landed on that I really wanted to help enable the success of others. And at the time thought that was going to be through a combination of coaching and consulting. Okay. And then I went to UC Berkeley to get my coaching certification. And the first day of that program, they had us get up in front of a group of relative strangers, and they asked us some really deep, probing coaching questions. And one of the questions they asked me was, what is your purpose? And I said, to spread joy.
Okay.
And then I looked around and I was like, who said that? Because that is not a thought I've ever had. Where did that come from?
Wow. So cool.
And then I was like, well, what does that even mean? Because here I am, like lawyer turned coach. I was thinking I'll get my executive coaching certification. I'll go and help people do what I had helped this financial investment firm do, which is like professionalize their back office, get their policies and procedures straight, help with the people management part, help them make the right hires, help them manage performance. Maybe go back into law firms and help lawyers be better leaders, because that's not something that's taught in law school. And then I get this like download from the universe, like, no, you're here to spread joy. And I'm like, what is that? Like, how do I, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And so, kind of put a pin in figuring out what that meant, worked on getting my coaching certification hours done, coached a wide range of people. And what I found that I liked working with people on is figuring out how to help them live in a way that they were aligned with what was most important to them. My whole story, right?
Wow.
And so now that's what I do. I work with successful but unsatisfied high achievers to help them live happy, lead happy, and build happy businesses. And it's so fascinating to me the way that it's unfolded. I was just talking to somebody yesterday. You know, they say like, I'm sure you've heard the saying, like your mess is your message.
Yes.
And I can remember thinking back, you know, maybe like a decade ago and being like, well, what is my mess? I don't know. Like my life has had its ups and downs, and there's been some bumpy parts, no question. But like, it hasn't been that, like, I don't have big drama or trauma. Like, what could my possible message be? Yeah. And voila, we found it. So
definitely. Yeah. Wow. That's so awesome. One of the things I would love for you to share is just kind of what's the difference? Like, what is like the detailed picture of who you were versus who you are now? What's changed?
So it's interesting. I was thinking about that. And I guess the way that I would describe it, one of the biggest shifts has really been, so let me back up a couple steps and tell you that when I think about happiness, I've concluded that the recipe for maximum happiness is actually super simple, right? It's do more of what matters to you and less of the rest. And then there's three things that kind of we get in the way of us executing on that recipe. Okay. The first I call the authenticity gap. So it's like, do you know, are you actually connected enough with self to know what matters most to you? And are you willing to claim that? Then there's the middle gap, which is like the mindset gap. Do you have the supportive beliefs and feelings to allow you to execute on this recipe? And then there's the action-based gap. Like, are you actually living in alignment with your priorities? And the thing is, we live in a really action-driven society. We like to figure out what we want, and then we like to go about getting it. But we don't often stop in that mindset gap to figure out whether we have the supportive beliefs and feelings. And for me, that's where the biggest shift has come. And I'll explain. So if you rewind back to that moment, that bathtub moment, and, you know, I've just switched jobs, And I still have some sort of lingering at that point, what I would call mindset barriers. So I'm a person who's very driven. I figured out I want a mom first season, but I'm still goal oriented. I'm still an achiever. I'm still want to go, right? And so I've decided I want more. And I think that in order to do more, I have to add more to the list. So my days are full, like full to the point of overwhelm. I'm saying yes to every opportunity that I can because I think that's the way that I get more.
Okay.
I'm not saying no. No is not even really in my vocabulary. I know that I'm super capable, right? And so I actually try to do everything on my own. I don't ask for help or support very often. I don't have a good sort of supporting cast around me. Sometimes my friends look at me and don't know how I'm even managing to juggle it all. They call me a superhero and I'm like patting myself on the back, like, way to go, right? When good things happen, I'm a like professional what ifer and I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like I'm worried about what's coming next, where it's going to go wrong. How can I prevent that risk? I'm getting a lot done. I'm having a lot of success. I'm accomplishing a lot, but everything is happening through sort of like sheer force of will, right? Like it's a lot of effort and a lot of pushing.
Okay.
And frankly, even though I've made some important changes in how my life is aligned, I'm still tired. I'm still overwhelmed. And despite my efforts to control outcomes and control circumstances, I'm actually out of control and I'm kind of over it.
Yeah.
And I really start to make the shift when I dig into all the mindset stuff. And that's a much more recent transition. That's probably within the last 6 years.
Okay.
And now I know that in order to have more, I don't need to do more. I actually need to do more of what matters and less of the rest.
Okay.
I say no a lot.
Yes.
I create a ton of boundaries around my space, my energy, and my time. Work isn't a struggle because I'm doing what matters to me.
Yeah.
I don't borrow trouble as much as I used to, meaning I don't what if my way through the day. Or if I do borrow trouble, I also make sure to borrow joy. So I make sure to what if how it's going to look if it really works out. I am an absolute support seeker. I know that I don't have to figure it all out on my own. In fact, people aren't meant to walk through life alone. And so when it feels too heavy, I either find somebody to help me carry it or I learn how to set it down. A big shift that I didn't talk about on the flip side is I'm not afraid of the difficult feelings. One of the things I used to do was like, oh, positivity breeds positive things. And so it was like this almost toxic positivity of like, I just won't think about the bad things. I'll always stay focused on the good. And there's something to that, right? Because where our focus goes, grows. But what has shifted is that I'm not afraid. I know life is going to bring us tough stuff. I know there's going to be rocky moments. I know I'm going to be sad and angry and scared, but I'm not afraid to walk through those feelings because I know that they bring me important messages and I just sort of like accept them for what they are. And then it's much easier to move through them.
Yes.
And I think I've struck a better balance of surrender and control. I'm not trying to make it happen. I'm trying to allow it to happen. And that's been a really big shift too.
Yes, that totally makes sense. I want you to expand just a little bit on the boundaries and how you're doing that with a family. So, people are used to you saying yes, 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 friends, family. What did that look like for you in your life and the conversations you maybe had to have?
So, I mean, the biggest thing is actually just more communication.
Okay.
So I think we assume that people will potentially bristle if we change our yeses into nos.
Yeah.
But when we actually take the time to communicate with people who care about us, why we are saying no, what's actually going on, why we're choosing A instead of B, my experience is often that it is not an issue or that you're better able to compromise. Let me give you a more specific example. So one of the things that we've worked on with my family and with my kids in particular is, it was easy, even though I was sort of like in a more flexible job in a mom first way, I kind of overcorrected and was like, I will show up to all the things, right?
Okay.
And then at a certain point that became a lot. It became a lot to try and juggle work and all the things. And then I realized I didn't even know if it mattered to my kids.
Oh, okay.
Like Sure, they care that I'm present. They want me to be present, but like there are certain things. Do they care if I'm there, or is it not a big deal? And so we've now moved to a place in our family where, when something comes up, I can ask, is this a must do, a can do, or a I don't care?
Okay.
Right. And then I get to
Wow.
decide how I want to show up. And then I can choose to show up in ways that make like that matter to them. And I talk about that idea with people, and often people who have younger kids. My kids are older. I have a 13-year-old and an 18-year-old. And they say, well, but mine are, 2 and 7. And I don't know how would I even have that conversation? Well, you can give your kids choices. Like, would you rather me sit down for breakfast with you or spend an extra 5 minutes with you at bedtime?
Yes.
And really it's about, and the same thing goes for sort of like even the extended friends and family, that we get this like guilt of like, no, but we have to show up or they're going to be disappointed. And we don't even know if they're actually going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
We haven't had the conversation. And so to me, a big part of that boundary setting is actually just figuring out what matters to other people before you decide for them what you think matters.
Yes. And I love how in that scenario, you're actually giving the child the power to be able to say which one.
Yes.
Because that in itself makes them feel more confident and more powerful in their decision making skills.
Yes.
And then there's absolutely no hurt feelings for either, for you not going to one because they made the choice
Yes.
of
And
which one.
maybe,
So
I mean,
you're
look,
winning all
you're
over.
you're winning all over, because I think one of the biggest challenges, so I talked about sort of the 3 gaps. One of the biggest challenges that I see is that people aren't even able to articulate what they want. And I think that starts in childhood. And so it's a great opportunity
Yes.
to build that muscle with your family. And look, sometimes your kid is going to say, I want you to sit down with me at breakfast and I want you
Yeah.
at bedtime. Okay, well, maybe you can accommodate that today and maybe you can't. And it's
Yeah.
okay, I think, then to be like, well, I can't, but let's do this instead. Let me, let's plan to have breakfast together tomorrow or whatever the thing is, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I so love that you're saying that. And I love that your example is giving your children, that confidence boost and the ability that you're just hitting it on both sides. So I think
Yeah.
that's so great. I would love for you to talk about intuition a little bit. I know you and I talked about that a lot on our first call. What does intuition mean to you? And then how do you allow it to work in your life?
So it's interesting because I come out of this sort of this profession that is all about sort of proof and fact, right?
Yeah.
And intuition means to me that inner knowing that we all have, and we do all have it, but we often get disconnected from it
Yeah.
because we live in a world. It's not just lawyers who are told we have to be able to explain our decisions, right? Um, and while I think there are some circumstances where professionally you still might need to then come up with the explanations. I was just working with a client recently, and we were talking about how to lean more strongly into the very strong gut instinct that she has. And she's like, yeah, but I still am going to have to come up with the rationale. And I'm like, cool, but that doesn't mean that you can't first decide with your gut and then go looking for the supporting cast, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, intuition means like for me personally in my life, it means really listening to my gut response to things and trusting it. And when it comes to my personal decisions, not needing to explain it. If it feels like a
Yes.
yes, it's a yes. If it feels like a no, it's a no. And if I'm not sure, it's a not right now, come back and ask later. And I don't need to tell you, like, in my journey, especially in developing sort of my skills as a coach, I have pursued some things that have made not a lot of logical sense, but it always makes sense in the end. And so I've just learned to trust the yes and follow it.
That's great. I like that you're allowing your clients to say no without explaining.
And I think like at this point, I've really like strongly leaned into listening to my gut. And like my family knows they aren't going to get I mean, sometimes they no, or yeah, we're doing that. And they're not going to get a long explanation of like why it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. Cause it's not that it's wrong. It's just, I know it's not for me right now.
Yeah, definitely. That's so cool. I have, so many females in general who who struggle in one way or another, in and amongst the Her Version group, in and amongst my clients. And one of the struggles that I see often is just the fact of knowing, like, okay, I know I don't like the position that I'm in my career. I know that. Well, now what? Like,
Yep.
what are the steps? Like, I don't even know what to do first. Can you give the examples that you used in your journey as far as like the first steps that you took towards, really out, living into or stepping into your authentic, journey of where you are now?
Sure. Actually, what I'd rather do, because I think I've learned some things since I've been through it that
Yeah.
that actually help. And so I want to talk about happiness, and some of the research around happiness first. And so when we're unhappy or we're feeling stuck, we have this notion, or most of us have this notion, that what needs to change is our circumstances. So our job, our partnership, um, our house, our health, our wealth. But the research says actually that those things are only responsible for 10% of our happiness.
Okay.
So doesn't mean that they can't have an impact on our happiness, but it means that it is not how we solve unhappiness. We don't start there.
Okay.
The remaining 90% is split as follows. 50% is related to our genetic set point, and that's genetic and epigenetic, and I'm not going to spend a bunch of time there. Where I think the magic happens is the remaining 40%, which comes from our daily intentional beliefs and behaviors. And so when a client comes to me and says, hey, I know I don't want to stay here, but I don't know where I want to go, the first thing that I like to work on is, how do we get as happy as we can be where you are today?
Okay. Yeah.
The reason being that from a platform of that happier place, it is easier to build or architect your happiness versus escaping your unhappiness by switching some circumstance.
Wow. Okay.
So that is not something that I did, but if I could go back, I would, right? It's like, how do I get as
Beautiful.
settled in myself where I am today so that I can really, instead of just solving one variable in the equation, I can solve the whole equation with my next move, right?
Awesome.
So that's the first step. And then kind of that can be happening in parallel with some work around taking stock of your current situation, fully understanding what is taking your time, your energy, and your resources in your life today. And when I say take stock, I mean literally write the inventory. Get a big fat piece of paper or a bunch of Post-it notes or some, a big document on your computer, and like put it all down so that you can see it. Get it out of your head onto a piece of paper. Everything that is taking your time, energy, and resources. And when you think you're done, you're not. So ask yourself, what haven't I written down? What else is keeping me up at night? What else am I worried about? All of it. I want you to ask yourself that a handful of times, because often we like resist capturing the things that are really under the surface and bothering us.
Wow. Okay. So write down on a piece of paper everything that's costing
That's
us
taking
our
your
time.
time, your energy, and your resources.
Wow. Okay.
And you
That's
don't have to
great.
get like granular. Like, it doesn't have to be like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, I'll put it in the grocery context. Like, you could just say like, I have to spend money on food. You don't have to be like, I have to buy cheese and lettuce
Okay.
and, like,
Okay.
it doesn't have to be that deep.
I
Right.
understand. Thank you.
But,
Yeah.
but, but I think it's the notion of trying to capture where all the outputs are going.
Okay.
And the one that gets missed often when we sit down to do this, or, when I see other people doing it, we focus a lot on time, but the energy is a big one.
Okay.
What we're worrying about, what we're thinking about, what we're spending that emotional energy on can be a really big drain. And so getting that on the
Beautiful.
piece of paper too is important.
Wow. Okay. That's absolutely phenomenal. And then that gives them a visual.
It gives you a visual, exactly. And every person, so I've had some people resist this exercise, and in particular, I've had lawyers resist this exercise because they say, Becky, I'm already billing my time. I know how I'm spending my time. I'm like, cool, do it anyway.
Wow.
And then they
Okay.
come back and they're like, you know what I realized? I realized that I'm taking a break every hour. Good, breaks are great. But in that break, I'm mindlessly scrolling the internet.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Well, you've just found potentially an hour to an hour and a half a day that you can redirect towards that 40% of the pie. What are some intentional behaviors that you could engage in that might bring you more happiness during that time instead of just mindlessly doing anything?
Absolutely. That's phenomenal. I love that.
So,
So cool. So cool. I want to ask, with all this talk of happiness, what does happiness mean to you?
so there's two ways that I think about happiness. The first is sort of the experience of happiness, meaning what does it mean? Like, am I happy? Am I joyful? Am I engaged? Am I content? Right? The other thing that I like to think about is what does it mean to live happy? And to live happy, in my definition, means to have, on balance, more positive emotional experiences than tough ones. And that's not possible in every second or every day or even every month of our lives, right? Like, we go through periods where the tough stuff outweighs the good stuff.
Yeah.
But if we can aim for living in a way that we are living happy, we build resilience so that when we have those periods, we're better able to weather them. And so for me, living happy is about like choosing to find, not ignore the negative, but to find ways to inject more positive emotional experiences into our lives. And that is by, on the highest level, that's by doing things that matter to us. On the most granular level, it's about knowing the little things that we can inject to make us happy on a daily basis. So for example, I love the sun on my face.
Okay.
I can go outside any day that the sun is shining and get the sun on my face.
Yeah.
I have to remember to do it though, right?
Yes.
And I have to know that that is one of the things. And if you had asked me 2 years ago what makes me happy, I would not have had that granular level of detail. I would have said things like time with my family and being on vacation. And so the key is to know those big things, but then to dig a little deeper. And so I'll use the vacation one as example. Well, what is it about vacation that you enjoy? Well, I like not having all the responsibilities of home. I like being at the beach. Well, why do you like being at the beach? I like being at the beach because I can be in the sun. Oh, well, now I can take that being in the sun and put it in my day anytime.
Wow. Absolutely. So easy, yet so difficult.
Well, yet we don't. But like, where do we learn to do that? Right? It's
Yeah.
not. It gets missed. And I think then we get this idea of like, okay, well, I have to go on vacation to be happy, but I can't go on vacation all the time. And so, like, how do I solve that?
Yes, absolutely. What a little hack that is, too.
Yeah,
What a
it's one of
little
my
hack.
favorites.
Yes, yes. And when you think about that, that is the thing that people think about when they go on vacation, is to just lay out in the sun. But
It's
you
Go
you
ahead.
can literally, on your lunch break at work, go out and sit, with your feet in the sun, if you don't want to get all, sweaty or necessarily whatever, while you're eating a sandwich or
That's right.
something.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. No, and I think it's about knowing those things about yourself. Like I have a person that I was doing this exercise with, and for them, it wasn't the sun, it was the quiet time with their thoughts. And I'm like, well,
Beautiful.
cool. How can you carve that out in your life today? And the key is that you're carving it out with the intention of savoring and enjoying it. Because we can, like, you might be somebody who eats lunch outside, but if you're not then remembering that, oh, this is like happiness gold. Let me enjoy
Yes.
it. Let me appreciate it. Let me
Yeah.
savor it. Like, you can mindlessly eat the chocolate, or you can be like, chocolate, yum, right? So it's the same idea.
Absolutely. Yes. And I love that that analogy of the chocolate. My fiance and I get into it sometimes because he's a sweet eater, and he'll sit down with chocolate or Oreos or whatever it is, and instead of eating 2 or 3, he'll have like 16. And I'm like, did you even enjoy that? Like, you're just like mindlessly just eat. Granted, he's like super thin and he works out and whatever.
He
But I'm just
can,
saying,
yeah.
like, you're not enjoying that food at all. You're just mindlessly, just as fast as you can, shoveling it into your mouth, versus what you're saying with like, okay, I love Oreos so much. Let me sit with 4 of them and really enjoy that.
Or with 16 of them. But like, if you're going to do it, you may
Let's
as
not
well
say
squeeze
that.
but my point is, you may as well squeeze the juice out, right? Like, you may as well juice the happiness.
Yes.
I was talking to a client about just this stuff recently, and she one of the things on her list was like, I really love time with my dog. And I'm like, well, cool. How can you spend more time with your dog? And she's like, well, I already walk him 3 times a day. And like, we have the most fun. And I'm like, well, but are you actually like enjoying those walks? Are
Wow.
you present in those walks? Are you
Yeah.
treating those as an opportunity, like to get some happiness juice? Or are you walking the dog while you're on a phone call, and walking the dog while you're like scrolling whatever, and walking the, we can
Wow.
choose how we show up to these things too. And that can make a big difference.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So within this journey that you've had up to this point, what's the number one lesson you've learned from your life so far?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question. I mean, I think we've talked about one of the big ones, right? Which is that like more isn't always more.
Okay. Yeah.
That we don't have to be like, there's this notion in the world of like more hustle equals more success, more doing equals more results. And I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it.
Okay.
I really think that it's all about like, it's not about the mindless more. It's about the targeted action and the targeted effort and the targeted showing up in the things that matter to you, that get you where you want to go. And so the analogy that I think of is like, if I was trying to fill a really skinny mouth bottle from a big pitcher, right? It would be hard and water would be kind of spilling everywhere. But if I can target it with a funnel, I'm going to make a lot less mess. And it's the same with our effort. Instead of spreading it everywhere, let's figure out how to sort of target it to the things that matter most to us. And then we can spend less effort overall, have more room to inject these sort of positive moments into our lives, and still get where we want to go.
Yeah. Okay. That totally makes sense. Definitely. I'd like to talk about disempowering beliefs for a second. We kind of touched on beliefs once or twice while we were talking. What do you think was your most disempowering belief that you have had in your life, and what do you believe now?
I mean, I think my most disempowering belief early on was probably that that my success has to look like what the world wants it to look like in order to be valid.
Yeah.
That, I need the title and the paycheck and the job and the grades and all those things in order to be happy and successful. I wasn't.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that I couldn't have been, right? Like I said, I know happy lawyers.
Yeah. Okay. I like that you're saying that.
But it's about recognizing that my definition of success could be my own,
Mm-hmm.
and that I didn't have to justify it to anyone else. I think anytime I've made a big change in my life, I've gotten hung up on, well, what will other people think? And I am hopeful that I'm done with that. I mean, look, it's in my fabric, so it's going to continue to rear up, but I hope I'm really like functionally done with that. It's not about what other people think. It's about what's right for you. And it's about clearing that with the people who mean the most to you.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, I totally agree. So with all of this, these awesome suggestions and nuggets that you're sharing with us, tell us what you do. This is your website up here, right? untangledhappiness.com. So, what kind of coach are you? What can we find at your website, and how do we kind of find you? If, for those listening live right now, obviously they're still here, they're still listening, they're resonating with what you're saying. How can they reach out to you? What do you do?
So what I do is I am a life leadership and happiness coach. And there's a couple of things you will find at my website. First, you'll find links to all my socials. So that's a great way to connect.
Beautiful.
Second, you'll find a link to my book, which you can see wrong shoulder. I'm like all twisted around. There it is. The cover is right back there. It's called The Happiness Recipe, a powerful guide to living what matters. And it's really a coaching guide to walk you through the process of aligning your life with your priorities. And you can find links to that on my website. And then the last thing you can find there is, two things. One, you can learn more about the coaching work that I do. I work with clients one-on-one. I might move into a group format sometime in 2022, still waiting to see how that's going to play out. you can also learn or get more information about sort of some of the speaking and podcasting that I've done. And the last thing is you can join my mailing list if you just sort of want to keep in touch and hear what I'm up to and hear how things evolve. So that's all on the website there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I so appreciate that. When clients sign up with you for you to be their coach, at what point, or I guess how would you define success to your clients? What does success look like for them?
Success in general or success in the coaching engagement?
I'm going to say for your client, like your client during your coaching feels successful.
So every coaching engagement that I do kicks off with a longer session. And in that longer session, we take stock, that exercise that I've already described. We get all the things out on the table so that we can know what we're up against. And then we define where we want to go. So we decide together where they would like to be by the end of our time.
Beautiful.
Working together.
And that's kind of what I was hoping you would say. So I don't want individuals thinking that they're coming to you to quit their job. Their journey doesn't have to look. So thank you for that. You answered that entirely correctly. So everyone's is going to look different.
100%.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. Like I was just this morning reflecting on the clients that I worked with in 2021. And so I want to make a chart because I'm kind of a data person, but I had a number of clients come to me, I would say in this space of like, I'm not happy, I'm stuck, I'm trying to figure out what to do next. And of that group, I helped clients launch businesses. I helped clients find their next job. I helped clients figure out that they were perfectly okay where they are for now, and that they could just be happier with, some work on their mindset and their daily activities and how they're showing up. Not that they'll stay where they are forever, but they're, again, building that platform from which to architect their future happiness. And so I think the answer is it could be any of those or something that I haven't seen yet, right? Because it is very individual. And often it doesn't look like what we think it will look like when we're in the midst of the stuckness.
Got it. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And it'll evolve too.
Yes.
For individuals who've never worked with a coach before, you might start out with one thing and then, call number, 13, you come to your coach saying, hey, listen, I had an epiphany last night.
That's right.
With the homework you gave me, and I'm actually thinking this. So, I totally agree with that. And I love that you're bringing that up. I'd love for you to give some advice, closing up here. What would be some advice firsthand, from you to all the females in the Her Version arena, for those that aren't feeling so happy, for those that aren't feeling any joy? What would be some advice you'd give them right now?
So I feel called to tell a story, and it's a little off topic of what we discussed, but one of the other sort of transformational experiences I had when I went to Berkeley for my coaching program was the following. So as part of the program, they send us out into the world to coach at real employers. And so like real live coaching is happening. And for many of us, it was our first time coaching in this new framework that we had learned. And before we launched into the world to do that, we did an exercise. And there were 33 people, including myself and my cohort, and 32 other people who are some of the coolest individuals I'd ever met, right? And so by this point, we've spent a really intense 7 days together, like 12, 14 hours a day. I know these people are amazing individuals.
Okay.
And so we have to do this exercise, and this exercise goes like this. We had to name something we were afraid of as we were embarking on this new activity. Okay. And then we had to dig into that fear until we got all the way to the root. And then we wrote that root fear on an index card. And then we handed it to somebody else. And we all had to share each other's root fears out loud. And there were more steps, but not important for the exercise. And do you know what every single one of those 33 root fears was?
No.
I'm not good enough.
Really? That just gave me the chills.
And I was like, there is no way that is true for any of these people. And I can't be the one person for whom it's true, right? Like it's just not possible. It's just false. It's a false fear. And so I know that's a little off the topic of happiness, but not entirely. And so my advice would be to realize that everybody in the world is walking around believing they are not good enough.
Yeah.
And it's all a bunch of baloney. We were all born good enough.
Yes.
You don't need to change yourself to arrive at good enough.
Yes.
You're already good enough. And if you're already good enough, you already deserve to be happy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What a way to close up. What a way to close up. So for those that are listening live, still hanging out with us, almost an hour in, they can go to your website to follow you on social, right? I know you said you're pretty big on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn and Instagram are my main dishes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And any closing thoughts? Any closing thoughts before I close up here? This was absolutely phenomenal.
I don't think I can do better than what I just
did. I know, that was
so good. But thank you for having me, for having this conversation. I think it's important that we're kind of talking about this stuff and making it helping people understand that it's accessible to them. I think where people get stuck on happiness a lot is like, so much will have to change before I can be happy. And it's just, I mean, it's not that I believe it's not true. Like the research supports the notion that that is not true.
Yeah.
It's not as inaccessible or as far or as difficult or as big of a change required as you think.
Absolutely. This was absolutely phenomenal. I so appreciate you coming on. I learned so much. This was so good. I thank you. I thank you for taking time out of your day to hang out with me and to share your journey. For those of you that are still listening live, I so appreciate you supporting the channel and hanging out with us for pretty much an hour. For those of you that are watching us on the replay, make sure that you hashtag replay before you close out so that we know that you were here and we can say hello and message you. But I'm going to close up. So thank you so much for joining us here on Her Version. This community is expanding every single day and it's filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button and make sure you follow, like, and share. If you have an amazing story to share, make sure that you contact me here at herversion.life. I was your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others, do something awesome